The snow came early to the Bow River Valley that winter, and it came hard, and by the time the woman stepped down off the wagon, nobody on the Hargrove ranch believed she would last the month. Her name was Sunny Aoki, though only the marriage papers, folded in Tom Hargrove's coat pocket, said so, and she was 26 years old, and she had crossed an ocean and half a continent on the strength of an advertisement in a Yokohama newspaper that a Methodist missionary had translated for her in a voice that kept catching on the English words. She stood in the churned mud of the yard, in a traveling coat too thin for Alberta in November, holding a single carpetbag against her chest, and she watched the steam rise off the breath of 7 or 8 men who had stopped their work to look at her, the way men look at weather coming. What they saw was small. That was the first thing. She came barely to Tom's shoulder, and Tom himself was not a tall man. What they saw second was foreign, and they did not bother to hide that they had seen it. One of the hands, a rangy fellow named Asa Brindle, with a chew of tobacco fattening his cheek, spat into the snow and said something low to the man next to him, and the man laughed, and Sunny understood enough of the laugh, even if she had not caught the words. Tom did not laugh. He came around the back of the wagon and took her bag without asking, which she would later understand was the kindest thing anyone did for her that whole first week, and he said, "Welcome to it, then," in a voice rough as bark, and led her toward the house. The horse she did not see until the 3rd day. She heard it before she saw it. Everybody on the ranch heard it. There was a low building set apart from the main barn, downwind, its own small corral fenced in rails as thick as a man's wrist, and from inside it came a sound that did not belong to any animal Sunny had words for in either of her languages. A scream, but with a floor under it, a kind of grinding fury that went on past where a normal creature would have run out of breath. The first time she heard it, she was carrying a kettle from the well, and she stopped dead in the yard, and the water sloshed cold over her wrist, and she did not feel it. "Don't," said the woman behind her. This was Bertie Coyne, the cook, a wide gray woman with forearms like a blacksmith and a face that had decided long ago to expect the worst. Bertie was the only other woman on the place, and she had not warmed to Sunny, but she was not cruel about it either, only tired. "Don't go looking," Bertie said. "That's Cinder. He's killed a man already and lamed 2 more. And Mr. Hargrove's too soft-hearted to do the one sensible thing, which is shoot him. You stay clear of that corral, and you'll live longer." But Sunny had already turned toward the sound. She could not have told you why. There was something in it she recognized, the way you recognize a face in a crowd before you've placed the name. It was not the rage. Anyone could hear the rage. It was the thing underneath the rage, the exhausted, frantic, cornered thing that screamed because screaming was the only language left to it. She knew that thing. She had heard it in herself on the boat, in the dark of the steerage hold, with the engine pounding through the hull, and her future a blank page, in a country she could not picture. She had not screamed. She had been raised not to, but she had felt the scream sitting in her chest like a stone, and she had understood, in that moment in the yard with the cold water running down her wrist, that the horse in that corral was screaming the thing she had only ever swallowed. That night at supper, she asked about him. The hands ate at a long table in the cookhouse, and Sunny ate at the end of it, apart the way you eat when nobody has decided yet whether you belong. Tom sat at the head when she asked, plainly, in her careful stepping-stone English, where the horse had come from. The table went quiet in a way that told her she had stepped on something. It was a young hand named Wesley Frame who answered, because he was too young to know better. The black stallion had come up from an outfit in the Cypress Hills that had gone bust, he said, and the rumor was the previous owner had broke him the old way, the cruel way, with whips and a blindfold and a Spanish bit that tore the mouth, and that something in the horse had broke wrong under it, gone to the bad, so that now he could not be near a man without trying to kill him. Tom had bought him, at the dispersal sale, for almost nothing, because nobody else would bid, and everyone on the ranch thought Tom had lost his mind, and a few of them had started to wonder aloud whether a man who'd pay good money for a killer horse and send away to Japan for a wife was a man whose judgment you could trust your wages to. "Wesley," said Tom, and that was all, and Wesley shut his mouth and stared at his plate. But Sunny had heard the part she needed, broke wrong, gone to the bad. They were words she had heard about herself, in a manner of speaking, in her own village, when she had refused the match her uncle arranged and taken the missionary's advertisement instead. A woman gone strange, a woman ruined for the ordinary things. She set down her chopsticks. She still ate with chopsticks then, which gave the hands one more thing to laugh at. And she looked down the table at her husband of 9 days, this quiet, weathered man she did not yet know, and she said, "I would like to see him." "No," said Tom, not unkind. "Just final, the way you'd tell a child no about a hot stove." She did not argue. In her country, you did not argue at the table. But the next morning, before the light, she went to the corral anyway. She did not go in. She was foreign, not foolish. She climbed up onto the bottom rail, in the blue dark with the frost burning her lungs, and she found Cinder standing in the far corner, with his head down and his flanks heaving, and she simply stayed there. She did not speak. She did not reach. She had no plan, no method, nothing she could have written down. She had only the memory of being a thing that everyone watched and nobody approached, and how, in those first days, the cruelest thing had not been the laughing, but the way every single soul on the ranch kept their distance, as though her strangeness might be catching. She thought, if I were him, I would want one creature in the world to come close and ask nothing. So she stood on the rail in the dark and asked nothing, and the horse, in the far corner, lifted his head and looked at her, and did not scream. That was the whole of it, the first morning. But she went back the next, and the next, always before the light, always to the rail, always silent. And every morning the head came up a little sooner, and the screaming did not come. It was Asa Brindle who caught her. He came around the cookhouse in the gray of the fourth or fifth morning with a lantern, and he found the master's strange little wife perched on the killer's corral like a sparrow on a gallows, and the laugh he gave was not a kind one. Mr. Hargrove, know you're out here making eyes at the man-killer? He held the lantern up to her face. You want to die, China girl. There's faster ways. I'll loan you a rope. She did not answer him. She had learned that much already, that with a man like Asa, an answer was a thing he could pull on. She only climbed down off the rail with what dignity the cold had left her, and walked back to the house, and behind her she heard him laughing, and inside the corral she heard Cinder begin, low and grinding, to scream again, and it was that, more than Asa, that made the heat come up behind her eyes, because she understood that the horse had not screamed at her. All those mornings, he had screamed at the lantern, at the man, at the species. She had been, for 4 mornings, the one exception, and Asa had walked into the dark and reminded the animal what humans were. She told Tom that night, not all of it. She told him she had been to the corral, because Asa would tell him anyway, and she would not be caught in the shape of a liar in her own first weeks of marriage. She braced for the no. She had it ready in her chest like a swallowed scream. Tom was quiet for a long moment in the lamplight of the front room, turning his coffee cup in his big scarred hands. Then he said, "What'd he do when you were there?" "Nothing," she said. "He looked at me. He was quiet." Quiet. Tom said the word like it was a foreign one to him too. "That horse hasn't been quiet since I brought him here." Bertie wears wool in her ears. "He is not bad," Sonny said. The English came out plainer and harder than she meant. "He is hurt. There is a difference. Everyone here sees a bad horse. I think nobody has looked long enough to see a hurt one." She had not planned to say so much. It was the most words she had spoken in a row since she'd arrived. And when they were out she felt naked, the way you do when you've shown a stranger the one true thing inside you. She waited for him to laugh, or to say no, or to remind her that she was a wife brought to keep a house and not a horsebreaker, and that her opinions on his livestock were not what he had paid passage for. He did none of those things. He looked at her for a long time, this small foreign woman at his table, and something moved behind his eyes that she could not read. "My father," Tom said finally, slow, "used to say there's 2 ways to make a thing do what you want. You can break it or you can teach it. Breaking's faster." He turned the cup again. Buried 2 horses and a hired man learned the breaking way. Always thought there had to be the other. Never had the patience to find out. He set the cup down. "If you go to that corral, you go in the daylight where I can see you, and you don't go through that gate. Not till I say. We clear?" "Yes," she said. And Sonny. It was the first time he had used her name. "If he kills you, I'll have nobody to blame but myself, and I've got enough of that already. So you be careful with my conscience, you hear?" It was as near to tenderness as the man had come, and she held it the rest of the night like a coal in cupped hands. The winter deepened. The work was endless, and it did not care that she was small or foreign, or that her hands cracked and bled in the cold until Bertie, grudging, showed her how to pack them with tallow and wrap them. She learned to haul water and split kindling and keep the great iron stove fed, and gut a deer and mend a saddle blanket, and she learned the men's names and which ones would never forgive her the color of her skin, and which ones were only following Asa's lead, because following was easier than standing apart. And every day, in the thin daylight, she went to the corral. She changed nothing about her method, because she had no method, only patience, which is not the same thing but which the horse could not tell, apart from love. She stood at the rail. After a week she sat on the rail. After 2 she brought a handful of oats and let them lie in her open palm through the rail, and did not so much as lean toward him, and on the 9th day of that he crossed the whole corral, one slow, suspicious step at a time, his ears swiveling like he was reading the wind for a trap, and he ate from her hand, and his breath was hot on her frozen fingers, and Sunny Aoki, who had not wept on the boat or in the cruel first weeks, or at any of Asa's laughing, put her face down into her own coat sleeve and cried. She did not hear Tom come up behind her. When she turned, he was standing a few yards off with his hat in his hands, and he had seen, and he did not say anything clever or anything cruel. He just looked at the horse eating from his wife's hand, the horse that had killed a man, and then he looked at his wife, and he nodded once, slow, like a man revising something he'd believed his whole life. It might have gone gently from there. It did not, because trouble on a ranch does not wait politely for the trust to finish building. It was the deep of February when Tom and the better part of the hands rode north to pull cattle out of a coulee where the snow had drifted them in, an all-day ride and likely an all-night one, and he left before dawn with Wesley and 4 others, and he left Asa Brindle behind to mind the home place, because Asa was a fair hand even if he was a poor man, and because Tom did not yet know what Sunny knew about him. She woke to the screaming. Not the old grinding fury. This was sharper, higher terror in it, and she was out of the bed and pulling her coat over her nightdress before she was fully awake. The yard was blue-black and bitter. The corral was a chaos of moving shadow, and at the rail stood Asa with a coiled rope in one hand and a long whip in the other, and 2 of the lesser hands beside him holding lanterns, and Cinder was throwing himself against the far rails in a panic so total that froth flew from his mouth and stood in the air like smoke. Catch him in the chute, Asa was saying. Old man wants a saddle horse. By God, we'll give him one before he's back. Show him a real man can break what a. And then he saw her, and his face split into something that was almost delight. Well, the China girl and her pet. Come to watch him learn his manners. She did not remember crossing the yard. She remembered being at the rail, between Asa and the gate, with her arms out, and she remembered her own voice, and it did not sound like the careful stepping-stone voice she used at the table. It came out of her whole and unbroken, the swallowed scream finally given air. You will not, she said. You will not touch him. Move, said Asa. He has done nothing. You wake him in the dark with whips, and you call it his fault that he is afraid. You are the bad thing here. Not him, you. For a moment, nobody moved. The lanterns hissed, the horse heaved against the raysails, and then Asa Brindle did the thing that men like him do when a thing smaller than them tells them the truth. He came over the rail to put her in her place, the whip coming back over his shoulder, and the 2 hands with the lanterns looked at each other and did not move to stop him, because that is also a thing that happens. What stopped him was the horse. Cinder came across that corral, not in panic, but in something colder and more deliberate, and he came between Asa and the woman at the gate, and he put himself there, a black wall of muscle, 18 hands at the shoulder, ears flat, and he screamed once into Asa Brindle's face from a distance of 2 feet. And Asa Brindle, who had broken horses with whips since he was a boy, dropped his whip and his rope in the frozen mud and went backward over the rail and ran. It was quiet after that, except for the horse breathing. Sunny stood at the gate. Slowly she opened her hand at her side, palm out, the way she had 100 mornings, asking nothing. And Cinder, a man-killer, a thing gone wrong, a creature everyone but 2 people on that ranch had given up for lost, turned his great head from the gate where his enemy had fled, and lowered it, and pressed his frost-rimed muzzle into the open hand of the only human being who had ever come close and asked him for nothing at all. When Tom rode in the next evening, half-frozen and trailing recovered cattle, the first thing he heard was that Asa Brindle and 2 hands had drawn their pay and gone in the night, and the second thing he heard, from a wide-eyed Wesley, was why he found Sunny in the corral, not at the rail. In it, on the inside, sitting on an upturned bucket with the black horse standing over her like a thing carved out of the dark, dozing his lip loose, one hind foot cocked in rest. Tom stood at the gate a long while. Then he said, quiet so as not to wake the horse, I sent away across the whole world for a wife, because I figured no woman who knew me would have me. Figured I'd get someone as desperate and strange as I was, and we'd make do. His voice did something then that she had not heard it do. I didn't figure on getting the only person in 1,000 miles who could see what I saw and not call me a fool for it. You are not a fool, Sunny said. No, he agreed. Looking at the horse, looking at her, I don't believe I am. They did not call the horse Cinder after that. It was Sunny's notion. And Tom let her have it, without argument, the way he was learning to let her have things. She said you could not ask a creature to become new, while you kept calling it by the name of the thing that hurt it. So through the rest of that winter, the black stallion answered to a new name, and the name she chose was Kazarabane. She told Tom it meant a feather worn for ornament, a thing carried not for use, but for beauty. Because a creature so long valued only for what could be beaten out of it ought, she thought, to spend the rest of its life being valued for nothing but itself. Tom could not make his mouth shape the Japanese, so he called the horse feather, which made the hands grin to say it about a stallion who'd put a man in the ground. But they said it, and the horse came to it, and in the saying of it, the whole place softened by a degree it could not have named. Spring took its time, the way it does in the foothills, lying about its arrival 3 or 4 times before it meant it. By the time the bow ran high and brown with melt, Sunny Aoki was no longer the strange small foreign thing nobody believed would last the month. She was the woman who had gentled Devil's own horse, with an open hand and the patience of stone, and the hands who stayed had stopped laughing and started, in their rough sideways way, to ask her things. How she got Feather to take the bit, whether her trick would work on a sour milk cow, what the word was in her language for this or that. She was still foreign. She would always be foreign in that valley. But foreign had stopped meaning lesser and had started, slowly, to mean only that she knew things they did not. She thought about that often in the years that followed, the long good years on the Hargrove place, with Tom Gray at the temples and the children loud in the yard, and Feather grown old and easy in a paddock by the house, where he would still cross the whole length of it to press his nose into her hand. She thought about the morning she had stood on the rail in the dark, asking nothing, with the cold water running down her wrist and her future a blank page, and how the things she had been raised to be ashamed of, the strangeness, the swallowed scream, the refusal to be broken into the ordinary useful shape, had turned out to be the one thing on that whole hard-frozen continent that the horse, and the man, and the life had needed her to be. She had crossed an ocean to stop being a creature that everyone watched and no one would approach, and she had found, at the end of the crossing, a black horse in a corral who taught her that the distance everyone had kept from her was never about what was wrong with her at all. It was only that nobody, until then, had been brave enough to come close and ask nothing. She had learned to be that brave for him, and in the learning, without quite noticing the morning it happened, she had become brave enough to be it, at last, for herself. The thing that stays with me about Sunny Aoki isn't that she gentled a horse 3 grown men couldn't. It's that she never once tried to. She stood at that rail in the dark and asked for nothing, and the asking for nothing was the whole of it. We get it backwards so often, I think. We believe the cornered things of this world need to be overpowered, hauled into line, shown who's stronger. Asa Brindle believed that, and he believed it with a whip in his hand, and the night he came over the rail to prove it was the night that horse decided, once and for all, what a human being was. Cause and effect runs clean as river water through that whole story. Cruelty taught Cinder to scream. Patience taught Feather to rest. Nobody skipped a step. Nobody got there fast. What I keep turning over is how much of what she did was simply refusing to look away. There's a kind of courage that has no drama in it at all, that looks, from the outside, like a small woman sitting on a bucket in the cold doing nothing. But it took everything she had to keep going back when Bertie warned her off, and Asa laughed at her, and her own husband told her no. That steadiness, that flat stubborn willingness to show up on the 9th morning, the same as the first. That's the muscle most of us never bother to build. We want the breakthrough without the 8 mornings of nothing that earn it. And she was clever in a way the ranch was too proud to see at first. She read that animal the way you'd read a hurt person, understood that the rage was a wall, and not the man behind it, that you don't argue a frightened thing into calm, you outlast its fear with your own quiet. That's a kind of seeing you can train in yourself. You start by assuming the difficult person, the difficult animal, the difficult day, is hurt before it's bad. You'd be astonished how often you turn out to be right. But none of the cleverness, none of the patience would have mattered without the plain decency underneath it. The refusal to be the kind of person who breaks a thing just because breaking is faster. Sunny chose, every cold morning, to be gentle in a place that mistook gentleness for weakness. And she was proven right, not by an argument, but by a black horse putting himself between her and a whip. So I take this from her, and I'd offer it to you. Be the one who comes close and asks nothing. Build the steadiness to keep coming back when there's no sign it's working. Train yourself to see the hurt under the harm, and hold tight to the simple goodness that won't break a thing it could mend. Those 4 together aren't soft. They're the strongest medicine I know. They mended a killer horse and a lonely man and a frightened foreign girl, all in one Alberta winter, and the work of them never once raised its voice.